Welcome to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, part of the Awareness to Action podcast network. I'm TJ Dawe, and this season my co-host Mario Sikora and I will be exploring the Enneagram through the lens of specific directors whose work demonstrates themes related to the 9 Enneagram types and 3 instinctual biases. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. In the meantime, make some popcorn, sit back, and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, Season 2. This is a very special Christmas episode. So we are stepping outside of our format for this season where we're focusing on directors. And TJ and I, and a special guest host today, are going to talk about 4 Christmas movies that we really like and talk about the Enneagram-related themes in those movies. So, TJ, how you doing? Why don't you say hello to everybody?
I'm doing really well. Really happy to be here and really happy to have our special co-host on this episode. You know, last time I was at the international meeting of different people named TJ, I met another one who happened to be into the Enneagram, and his name is TJ Ingrassia, and he's a brilliant video editor. And if you haven't seen his YouTube series Typecast, which combines clips from movies and TV shows looking at different actors and different scenes that embody the 9 types, you should really check that out. It's high quality stuff. TJ Ingrassia, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
TJ Ingrassia, I'm going to reiterate what TJ Dawe said. I'm a big fan of your videos, your typecast videos where you use movie clips to show each of the 9 Enneagram types. And your most recent one, I have to say, is my favorite, looking at the 3 subtypes of the 8 through the movie The Godfather.
Not that you're biased or anything.
Not that I'm biased, but hey, you know, it is about 8s, right? So, and that's what, you know, I care about. But I think you did a really good job with it and really encourage people to take a look at that. It's very well done. And also to listen to our episode on Type 8 and The Godfather from last season. TJ, you do some other things as well, too. Tell us what else you do.
Sure. I'm a freelance video producer based in St. Louis, Missouri. So I do typecast sort of on the side as a passion project, but I pay my mortgage doing video production. I do a podcast with my brother called Agnostish, where we talk about growing up in evangelical Christianity and faith and spiritual journeys and that kind of thing. Yeah, just do a lot of video work professionally and personally, and that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. So anybody who might be looking for your video production services, your website is tjingrassia.com, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yes. Spell that for everybody.
Ingrassia.
Yeah, the kid's got talent, so check him out. I think he's going places. And now we are going to go to the North Pole, in a sense, right? And talk about Christmas movies and the Enneagram. So we're going to focus on 4 movies today. And I think we've kind of run the gamut of genres here, right? So we're going to start off talking about It's a Wonderful Life. And then we're going to talk about A Christmas Story. 3rd movie will be Elf. And the 4th movie will be Die Hard. Now, I usually try to go in chronological order with the movies. We're mixing it up a little bit this time. I wanted to save Die Hard for last because I think we need to have a little debate about whether or not Die Hard really is a Christmas movie or not, okay? Which is an ongoing debate in the world of people who have nothing better to talk about, like us. So, you know, we'll save Die Hard for last, okay? But before we do that, TJ, TJ Dawe, what are we going to start with?
Yeah, instead of talking about a given Enneagram type or strategy or a given director, because we're watching movies with 4 different directors, we're going to talk about Christmas itself. What Enneagram energies do we see at play over the Christmas season, at least as it's celebrated in America? And I include Canada in that too, because even though Canada is not the same as the US, it's mostly the same. And even though a lot of Canadians will give me some passive-aggressive shade for saying that, Canadians grow up consuming American media, at least 90% of which, particularly the Christmas stuff. So yeah, Canadian and American Christmas. Different than European Christmas, different than Christmas in other places, but this is the Christmas that I grew up with, that most of us, probably most people listening to this podcast, will think of. So what's going on here? And there's a couple of things I've got in mind. My strategy is type 4. striving to feel unique. As a kid, I loved Christmas. And then now as an adult, I can see that that was largely focused on material desire. We'll get to that when we talk about A Christmas Story. And I got pretty cynical about Christmas as I reached into adulthood. Something Richard Rohr said is that we are the shiningest example of our type at age 20. And if I think of who and where I was at 20, I really didn't care for Christmas at all. And then when I started getting in romantic relationships, I had a number of them. Some of my more serious relationships were with twos who loved Christmas, loved everything about Christmas. And when I eventually learned about the Enneagram, I started to piece together, okay, why might that be? Well, at Christmas, one of the big rituals, giving gifts. Twos love giving gifts, love showering people with loving attention in that way, and celebrating with family. At least the twos I was with were very family oriented. And what does the family do together aside from giving gifts? Eat. A great big meal for all of us to share. So all of these loving two things, as well as sentimental music. And so the four in me rejected all of those things. The music was corny and trite, and people only liked it because they had to. And gift giving was quite often disappointing. It was a matter of somebody proving how little they actually knew you by giving you something that was related to something you were interested in 7 years ago, but aren't anymore. Some projection of who they think you are that was inevitably a letdown. And Christmas movies were, again, just a dime a dozen and corny. And those relationships were before the era of Hallmark movies. So I imagine I would have been even more cynical and grumpy about those things at the time. And family. I was pretty alienated from my family. I would show up for Christmas dinner, but I would it was something to get through. It wasn't an opportunity to really share my soul and have in-depth conversations. So yeah, Christmas had a lot of baggage for me for a lot of years.
So this is very interesting because, again, we don't know the true Enneagram type of Christmas. We don't know the true official Enneagram type of Santa Claus or of the baby Jesus. So we are kind of doing a thought experiment here, right? We are speculating and we're bringing our own perspective. Okay. I think as we'll see with these movies, we can kind of cherry pick, right, different themes that we like. I mean, I think any one of us can watch the same movie and walk away with it saying, hey, here's the theme, the type theme that I saw in this, whereas somebody else might say it differently. And there's no right or wrong answer, right? And the whole goal of this podcast is not to definitively say Santa Claus was a 2 or, whatever we think Santa Claus might be, but to say, here's how the way we live our lives reflects these different strategies and instinctual biases and so forth. For me, it's a much more interesting conversation. So, TJ Ingrassia, tell us a little bit about Christmas from your perspective.
Well, my strategy is type 1. So growing up, I had a lot of guilt around Christmas. My parents made a pretty let's say Christmas morning was extravagant. There was an orgy of gifts under the Christmas tree. And I remember as a kid, sort of being conflicted over, of course, every kid loves to get presents, but also just feeling like, well, man, there's a lot of kids who probably woke up and didn't have any presents, and just feeling some guilt over like, this is too much. I'm uncomfortable with this. And, of course, now I shower my own kids with presents because, I think that's a pretty magical, Christmas morning. Just there's something about it. It goes beyond, I get the sort of the cynical American consumerism thing you were talking about, TJ Dawe, but there is something magical about waking up with presents under the tree on Christmas morning. So that's something I've sort of not exactly struggled with. As we were planning for this podcast, I was thinking back to that and remembering those more conflicted mornings on Christmas.
Great, thanks. So it's very interesting. My Christmases today are very different than my Christmases were as a child, right? So my Christmases as a child were perfectly fine. Like everybody else, I was excited to wake up in the morning and open the presents and that sort of thing. And we always got, nice, a couple of things here. I remember one year getting a stereo and another year getting an Atari, system and all that. Yes, that's how old I am. So, but now the Christmases here are over the top, right? I mean, our house is, I say, like a classier version of the Griswolds, right? As far as lights are concerned, they're not really. So, but we do up the lights. We have 4 boys, and they each get a fair amount of stuff, right? My wife's family, Christmas was always a big, 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 big deal. Right. And so that has kind of carried on. So for me, I'm fairly indifferent to holidays, quite frankly. Right. I mean, I say, yeah, okay, fine. I don't dislike them. I don't really, get too excited about them. Actually, my favorite holiday is Thanksgiving because I think it's one of those holidays that's kind of hard to, well, for me, it has a really nice meaning to it, right? Of just being grateful for the people around us and who we care about, that sort of thing. But, Christmas is great for the kids for me. For me, it's a holiday about the kids. Now, I think we do have to talk about the, shall we say, gulf between the meaning of Christmas, right? It's about the birth of Jesus and, in a manger and all of these things, right? Versus what it has become in particularly the United States, right? It's not as over the top in most other places that I'm aware of. And now, for me, Christmas is all about excess and excitement, right? I mean, and whereas TJ, you associated a lot with the two, in my mind, it's a very seven-ish holiday, right? It is about gluttony and excitement, right? And it's, I want more stuff. I want to give more stuff because it makes me feel good to give stuff to people. I want to eat a lot, right? I want to wear my, my stretchy fat guy pants, for a couple of days there and eat whatever I want. So I always think of it as a time of indulgence, for better or worse, right? And so that's the lens I'm bringing to thinking about Christmas, right? And even I think it'll come in some of my perceptions of these movies, okay? But really interesting thing to talk about. So, okay, so also I'll say, what do we call Santa Claus? Jolly old Saint Nick, right? Jolly is kind of seven-ish thing, right? And he eats cookies everywhere he goes, right? So, there you go, right? So I just keep seeing gluttony everywhere I look, right? Gluttony and jolliness. So so let's talk about the first movie, okay? So TJ Dawe, I think you're going to start us off with It's a Wonderful Life. So why don't you go ahead there?
And as always, we're going to do a short summary before we discuss every movie. And these are full summaries. There will be spoilers. If you somehow have not seen A Wonderful Life or do not know how it ends, feel free to skip this or just be ready for it to be spoiled. So It's a Wonderful Life came out in 1946. It was directed and co-written by Frank Capra. And it tells the story of George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, who lives in a small town in upstate New York. It's Christmas Eve and he's on the verge of taking his own life. Pretty unusual framing device for a Christmas movie. A few angels confer and agree to send Clarence, an angel who hasn't earned his wings yet, to intervene. First, Clarence is given the background on George's life, which lets us, the audience, in on the story of who this guy is. So he grew up as the son of a small businessman who ran the Bailey Building and Loan, a bank and lending institution, and the one financial institution in the town that isn't owned by the local bigwig Henry L. Potter, played by Lionel Barrymore, who has a beautifully snarly voice throughout. So Potter would like to wipe out the building and loan, but is repeatedly frustrated in his attempts to do so. George dreams of doing big things. He doesn't want to stay in this little town. He wants to travel the world, build skyscrapers, airfields, bridges a mile long. You hear him say this a bunch of times in the movie. But circumstances and his sense of responsibility repeatedly prevent him from leaving, and he stays to work and eventually run the family business. Along the way, he falls in love with Mary, played by Donna Reed, who's the classic small-town nice girl. They move into a decrepit house. They renovate it. They have 4 children. And then on Christmas Eve, George's eccentric Uncle Billy misplaces a significant amount of the building and loan's funds on his way to deposit it in the bank, which threatens to bankrupt the business and send Uncle Billy to jail, although George decides to take the bullet for him and go to jail in his stead if it comes to it. George comes home distraught, vents his frustrations on his family, and then storms off into the night. He winds up on a bridge looking at the rushing water, getting ready to jump in, when splash, Clarence the Angel jumps in first, and George leaps in to save him and brings him out. And while they're warming up, Clarence tells him who he is, that he's an angel. George doesn't believe him, of course. And then as they talk, George states that he wishes he'd never been born. Clarence grants him the chance to see what his hometown would be like if he'd never existed. George walks through the town, seeing that the town is renamed Pottersville, that Potter owns everything, and it's now a den of dance halls and sleazy bars and general iniquity. And everybody he knew from his life is worse off in one way or another. He comes to realize that he really has had a wonderful life, and he runs back to the bridge, praying, begging God to have his old life back, which he gets. Then he runs through the town, elated, yelling well wishes at everyone and anyone. He comes home. There's warrant officers waiting to arrest him, which he gladly accepts. His wife, Mary, comes in, bringing dozens of people with her who pooled their money as soon as they had heard he needed help. And it's more than enough to compensate for the money that was lost. And the police rip up the warrant for him. And everybody sings loving Christmas carols. Clarence the Angel gets his wings and leaves a message for George that no man is poor as long as he has friends.
So, thanks, TJ. And so what's interesting there is at the end, they don't sing a Christmas carol. They sing Auld Lang Syne, right? Which is associated with New Year's Eve. And something that struck me about this movie is, and as my wife and I were watching it the other night, she said, this isn't really a Christmas movie, right? Because it's not about Christmas. It takes place at Christmas time, but it's really, not so much Christmas music and a movie. And it turns out the reason it became so associated with Christmas is because the copyright on the movie ran out. And so TV stations realized that they could play it without having to pay royalties. And so it became the tradition of playing it at Christmas time. And it became viewed as a Christmas movie, even though it really doesn't talk too much, if at all, about Christmas. Okay.
And was a bomb when it came out.
Absolutely, yes. And it almost ended Frank Capra's career, who had, been very successful up to that point. And so it's interesting the life it has taken on after an initial failure. TJ Ingrassia, tell us about Enneagram-related themes that you saw in It's a...
Oh boy, you picked me to start. Okay.
So I'm testing you here. So go
ahead. Well, talking about, you thought that, and in Christmas has a very seven-ish sort of feel. I got sort of a seven-ish vibe from George Bailey. He wants to get out. He wants to see the world. At one point, he's talking to his father at the table, and he says, "I couldn't face the rest of my life cooped up in his shabby little office." He needs to get out, and he's continually thwarted from getting out. Throughout the movie, he's almost there. He's getting ready. He's going to board the train, and then disaster strikes. Potter strikes, and he has to stay. And he does the right thing. He stays and helps people. Helps the town, but it seemed, the seven vibes seemed pretty clear to me.
Yeah, so I agree, and for me, so Jimmy Stewart is a fascinating actor. I mean, he's one of the greats, and watching this, I was reminded of just how good he really is, right? And I think he can play multiple characters. He does 9 very well, too. I always think of Harvey, one of my all-time favorite movies about the giant invisible rabbit. I think he's fantastic. But I also got kind of a 7-ish vibe from him, and it was that idea of this desire to go out and see the world. And, this, because when they asked him what he wanted to do, or when his father asked him what he wanted to do, he said, well, I want to go out. I want to build big buildings. I want to create cities. He had these aspirations. And like you said, the idea of having to stay here for the rest of my life is almost more than I can bear. So, but that was his fate, indeed. Something that we see in sevens that is usually not in the literature is that this feeling of disappointment in life. And this is the theme of It's a Wonderful Life, right? He has to be told that, no, it wasn't that bad. One of the things that plagues the 7 is building up this excitement about the possibilities of life, or how good this meal is going to taste once I'm finished cooking it, or once it arrives, and then tasting it and saying, it's okay. Right? I should have gotten this, or I should have done that. So this for me is the big theme, right, of this disappointment of things. Now, in our trainings, we talk about the accelerator of the 7 being savoring, learning to sit with what is and appreciate it rather than thinking about what could have been. Very difficult. Also, at point 7, a core thing is around joy and the stunting of joy. Joy being something that arises in us naturally, independent of external stimulation. Okay, so I don't need that, Red Ryder BB gun in order to be happy, not to jump ahead to our next movie, but I don't need that thing. I just, life is good. and I'm happy, and everything's going to be okay. And so I can live on here. So trying to recapture that essential joy is a big part of the work of the seven. Okay. Now, again, I think there are multiple themes that we can find here. Okay. So the definitive answer is not seven. TJ Dawe, tell us what you saw.
Yeah, it's interesting to consider this because the resolution is very seven for his character in that he's suffused with gratitude for everything, for the small town that he'd felt so cooped up in, for the business that had trapped him, for the fact that he's going to jail. He's just beaming with joy and gratitude because he gets to live. And that's a seven thing as well, is like a truly present seven can be brought to a state of ecstasy by everything, no matter how mundane. There's just such appreciation and gratitude of every single thing. Another possibility for the character, because what occurred to me is I agree with everything you both said about his character being very sevenish. What occurred to me watching it was there's a lot of sixishness in his character as well. For one thing, he's very reactive. He does a lot of telling off. Even as a little kid, when he walks into the office to get some advice from his father, old man Potter's denigrating him. And as a little kid, he runs right up to Potter and yells at him and even shoves him. There's very few scenes where somebody says something that he doesn't have a quick response to. So there's that reactivity. Another sixth thing that he does, he's very good in a crisis. In an early scene, his younger brother plunges through a frozen lake and he immediately jumps right in. And same with when Clarence jumps into the river. No hesitation, boom, I'm in. So the kind of second guessing oneself that sixes often do, usually in an emergency, whoosh, that's gone. Also, huge sense of responsibility. This tremendous, he understands my younger brother's getting this opportunity to go be a researcher at something he's really good at. So instead of him taking over the family business, I'll let him do that. I'll stay. And he always makes the responsible choice in terms of I'm going to defer my own desires and do what's best for my family and for this small town. Yeah. And he's very playful. Certainly sevens have that too. But in terms of the way that he relates to his younger brother, in the way that he flirts with Mary as they're first getting together. At one scene she runs and her robe comes off and she's hiding in a bush, and instead of just giving it, he starts teasing her. And obviously he's not going to do anything untoward, but he's enjoying being playful like that. So some real sixishness in there. But ultimately, what really motivates him? Is it this desire to be excited, or is it a desire to feel secure? Excited makes more sense in lieu of all the things we're talking about.
We always talk about this, that very few portrayals of characters in movies are pitch perfect, right? They're usually a blend of different things. Every movie, most movies have multiple screenwriters. You have the director, you have the actor, all of them bringing things. You have uneven scripts, so forth. So again, it's there's no sense. It would be a silly argument to say, no, he's a 6, no, he's a 7 kind of thing, right? And again, our goal is to point out what we see. I will say that upon initial watching, and I think even TJ Dawe, when you and I were talking the other day, I mentioned I saw him as a navigating 7. Upon reflection, I actually see a lot of preserving stuff to preserving 7 in some of the characteristics that look sort of 6-ish, right? That responsibility, that caution, that dutifulness. Something that people don't really understand about preserving 7s is they're actually very responsible toward the family, toward the expectations of them, and they often resent those responsibilities that are thrust upon them, right? In the same way that George Bailey did. But again, certainly 6-ish themes we could see there. Another thing that we didn't mention was the very beginning when the angels are talking to each other and deciding to intervene in his life. They talk about the case, and one of them says, I forget what he assumes the problem is, but the other angel says, no, it's even worse. He's discouraged. And that is really a 7-ish sort of thing, is that fear of being discouraged, right? And discouragement is the ultimate sin in a way for 7s of I've lost hope. I've lost, this thing to look forward to. And it's why 7s can fall into depressions and, even suicide at times. Lots of 7s, Robin Williams, a great example, probably Anthony Bourdain, that, can be suicidal. So on that happy note, what else? Any other Enneagram related themes we saw? How about Mr. Potter? Any thoughts on any thoughts on his Enneagram style?
Is there any question that he's an 8? Do we need to even talk about it?
Yeah, I think he's probably a good example of a type 8, right? Not the most compassionate human being. Any others?
I did want to go back to George Bailey real quick. One thing that was interesting is I agree with everything that you said, TJ Dawe, about that, but I was seeing it through the lens, and of course I'm biased on this, but through the lens of, as a 7, going to his support strategy of type 1. The feeling like he needs to do the right thing, the responsibility. I know that obviously as a 1, I feel those things. And 1s and 6s can have a lot, there's a lot of overlap there sometimes. So I think that can also help to explain some of that, just reinforcing that, yes, he was experiencing those things.
Any other characters? Go ahead, TJ Dawe.
Yeah, just to say a word about Potter as the unhealthy 8, just to flesh that out a little bit, he's a business baron and he wants to own everything and he wants to control everything. And it really bothers him that he can't get control of this one little business. It's the holdout. And at one point, he offers to hire George Bailey to work for him. And he offers him a salary of $40,000 a year, which one of the things trivia on IMDb said is that's the equivalent of about $300,000 or $400,000 today, as opposed to the approximately $46,000 equivalent today that he was earning at the time, as well as yearly business trips to New York and Europe. So he knows exactly who this guy is and exactly what he wants. And he's dangling the prize in front of him, which George is initially attracted to. But that's Potter's motivation the entire movie is I want to control everyone and everything. And if there's somebody I can't control, that sticks in my craw. Mary, the wife, I think is maybe a pitch perfect preserving 2. Women in movies, or especially in old movies, quite often have that role. The good, dutiful, loving, pretty, but not aggressively beautiful wife. She's very family oriented. She's very home oriented. One of the big motifs one of the big elements is the house they move into, which is this decrepit old mansion that the locals throw a rock at and try and break a window for good luck. And that's where they move in. They give up all their money for their honeymoon, and she immediately sets that up and somehow fixes that up into something livable, even that night with rain dripping through the ceiling. And there's a little chicken on a rotisserie, over the fireplace that's being powered by the record player. It's very domestic. She makes the place beautiful and warm and cozy. And on their wedding night, she said, "Remember the night we broke the windows in this old house? This is what I wished for."
I would agree with that. Not a really detailed character, as was the case in most of those movies, but that sounds pretty good to me. TJ Ingrassia, anything you would add to that?
No, that pretty much wraps up. Yeah, I agree about Mary, and I'm not sure there's many other characters.
Yeah.
We can quote comment on some external traits, but it's hard to really say. That it could be a half dozen different types they're going for there.
Exactly right. A couple of final observations I'll make about the movie. Okay, we already talked about how it's not really as much as of a Christmas movie as we tend to think about. But also, it's funny because when I started to watch it, they always list the parental warnings at the beginning, right? And the parental warnings it was a fairly lengthy list going into this movie. And I haven't seen the movie in years. And one of the things was strong language and sexual situations. And I'm thinking, what? And then as I started watching it, I'm thinking, yeah, man, this is pretty, these are not things that they would do in movies today, right? There was this, he was pretty hostile toward women at certain points, right? He was pretty demeaning of women. There's the scene with the maid where the brother actually chases her out of the kitchen and grabs her rear end on the way out, and, of course, the stereotype of the sassy black maid, which was very common in movies of that time. So I was surprised at, again, when you go back and you watch something of a different era through today's eyes, how jarring some of the scenes were, right? In that sense. Thoughts on that, guys?
Well, one thing to throw in there, too, is the character of Violet, supporting character.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, she's kind of the vamp. She's the town vamp. And what jumped out for me is probably a transmitting 2.
Mm-hmm.
In that she loves getting attention. And at one point, even when she's a little girl, Mary says to her, "You're in love with every boy." And she says, "What's wrong with that?" So it's like there's 2 kinds of women you can be, and they're both 2s. There's the good, dutiful home and family 2, or there's the nasty, vampish, sexually aggressive 2.
Right. TJ Ingrassia, any final thoughts on It's a Wonderful Life?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. I hadn't seen it in many years, until I watched it to prepare for this. And the funniest thing that I noticed in the movie was, Jimmy Stewart's playing the character, obviously past the childhood, but the first scene where we see him after childhood, he's supposed to, I don't know how old he's supposed to be, 20 years old, maybe 21, and Jimmy Stewart's mid-40s, a grown man. It's like, it was comical how it's like, yeah right, you're not that young.
Yeah, right. It's like the high school movie with the kid with a beard, and full. So I agree. That was entertaining and jarring.
You were talking about Jimmy Stewart's range earlier, saying, well, that might be the one area where he didn't his range wasn't so good.
Yeah. I'll say I enjoyed the movie as well. Obviously, I'd seen it many times before in the past, but it had been a long time, and so it was nice to see it again. And really, for me, the key takeaway was appreciating the talent of Jimmy Stewart and his ability to engage an audience and to be likable, and for you not to be able to take your eyes off, and for him to be able to express so much, with so little effort. Really enjoyed it. One final thing I'll make, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the show 30-something from the 1980s by Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz, I think. Their production company was called Bedford Falls Productions, and they were highly influenced by that movie. 30-something is a TV series back in the 80s that people either loved or hated. It was really, really popular at the time, but has had almost no afterlife. And each episode would end with a scene, kind of a graphic from It's a Wonderful Life, and that line from the song, Dance by the Light of the Moon. Is that what it was? The song from Buffalo Gal. Yeah, that line. So anyway, that kept striking me as I was watching again, this piece of really obscure trivia. Okay.
One last thing to point out, too, is that there's something I think really fourish about the framing device being a man on the verge of suicide. Again, very unusual for what's come to be a beloved Christmas classic and a family movie. And then an earlier scene in George Bailey's backstory is he works as a delivery boy for a pharmacist. And he's there.
Yes.
We see the day that the pharmacist received a telegram that his son died of Spanish flu. And he's just broken with grief and accidentally fills the prescription wrong, creating poison pills, which George is smart enough to notice. But he doesn't want to hear it. He sends him out. And then eventually when he comes back, not having delivered the pills, he attacks him, slaps him on the side of the head, draws blood, which I read as a point of trivia. The actor actually slapped him and actually drew blood. But all of that, the compassion, the grief, the relief, the fact that he embraces George once he finds out his mistake, very, very fourish, I find. Just how much sadness and despair is there. And that really appealed to me when I was a kid, when I watched it. Not that I realized that, but this is a Christmas movie with depth. And the movie hit me right in the heart. And
yes,
Jimmy Stewart is very easy to mimic, and many, many people do, and this movie has passed into the common language. People know of it even if they haven't seen it. It's very easy to dismiss it and him as cliches, when I think it really delivers, and so does he. And it actually brings tears to my eyes every time I watch it. And I think it holds up as one of the great movies that's ever been made.
Yeah, I would agree. Watch It's a Wonderful Life. It's worth it. Are you interested in learning more about our approach to the Enneagram? Go to awareness-to-action.com and check out our certification program. We offer a clear, concise, business-friendly, and science-minded approach while maintaining the depth of traditional approaches to the system. At Awareness to Action International, we're the leading innovators in the theory and pragmatic applications of this system to all aspects of the work environment, including leadership and personal development, team building, diversity and culture, and managing change. However, this approach is not just for the business world. A lot of people who attend our trainings do so for their own self-development or spiritual growth. Our certification program is one of only a handful of curricula accredited as a school by the International Enneagram Association. It is currently being conducted virtually and combines live sessions with asynchronous learning. Again, find out more at awareness2action.com. Okay, so let's move on to our second movie now. 1983's A Christmas Story. And TJ Ingrassia, why don't you tell us a little bit about A Christmas Story?
Sure. Growing up, this was my favorite Christmas movie. When I was a kid, TNT had 24 hours of A Christmas Story. So I would get up early. I was always an early riser, but I would get up before everybody else on Christmas morning and make sure I watched it before we got up. Everyone else, got up and opened the presents. So that was my Christmas tradition every year. So Christmas Story is made in 1983, directed by Bob Clark of Porky's fame. If any Porky's fans out there.
Two very similar movies.
Right, yeah. Childhood nostalgia, we'll say.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so the movie takes place in 1940, give or take. There's actually a little bit of debate about whether it's 1939 or 1940, but we'll go with 1940. It's the story of Ralphie Parker, played by Peter Billingsley, who has a bit part cameo in Elf, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Ralphie's a 9-year-old boy who wants a BB gun for Christmas. And it's not just any BB gun. He wants the Red Ryder carbine action 200-shot range model air rifle with a compass in the stock and this thing which tells time, which apparently is not a real BB gun. That was They made it up or Gene Shepard, I guess, made that up for his book, which they then made a custom one for the film. Right. And the plot revolves around his many foiled attempts to convince the adults around him that it's a good idea for a kid to have a BB gun. And he's continually rebuffed with the now famous line, "You'll shoot your eye out." And spoiler alert, he does get the BB gun and he does almost shoot his eye out. So for the party pooping adults, it's, score one for them.
See?
Exactly. And there's several subplots throughout the movie. One's about his father fighting with the furnace, fighting with the neighbor's 785 smelly old hound dogs. There's the Battle of the Lamp. His father wins this major award. It's a lamp in the shape of a woman's leg with fishnet stockings, which Ralphie is very enamored with when he first sees it. And the battle between the mother and the father over the lamp in the house. And then there's a subplot of the bullies, Scott Farkas tormenting Ralphie and his brother and his friends. But the main plot of the film is the BB gun, which he does eventually get, which one of the last lines of the film is that he says it's the best Christmas present he ever received.
A classic. I don't know if TNT or TBS still does the 24 hours of A Christmas Story, but I know that they've done that up until recently. And in fact, they extended it to both channels, right? I mean, It used to be on one of them, and then they started doing it on the other as well. I guess it's an easy way to program a day. It is a great movie. I always enjoy watching it. For me, the highlight of it is Darren McGavin. I will watch anything with Darren McGavin in it, and I think he's great in this. TJ Dawe, tell us about Enneagram-related themes in A Christmas Story.
Well, just to take the baton about Darren McGavin, who plays the dad, whose first name is never mentioned. He's always referred to as the old man.
The old man.
Or my old man. One of the best comedic performances I've ever seen in any movie, and probably the best preserving 8 I've ever seen in a movie. So he is at war, and he's always at war with domestic things. So the big thing is the furnace. And as soon as he hears this rattling from downstairs, he perks right up. And what was he doing before that happened? He was grousing about his car that froze up, and he just curses that Oldsmobile would freeze up on the equator in the middle of summer. So, he's always at war with the car, and then suddenly, the furnace makes a loud clank, and he says, "It's a clinker," and rushes downstairs, excited and angry, so that he can battle with this furnace. And he spews this improvised soliloquy of gibberish as he battles the thing, and smoke comes out of the vent, and he's always cursing like this. Also, the leg lamp is very much like it's something from the domestic arena, and it's something he puts in the window when he stands out on the sidewalk, and neighbors just happen to walk by and all gather as he points it out to them. It's this symbol of his own power and his own achievement and his own, like, putting one over on the system. And then he's a turkey addict. So on Christmas Day, the mother brings the turkey out just to baste it or maybe to put the stuffing in. We're not quite sure. It's not ready. And he can't stop himself from getting a taste of it. And then, of course, the neighbor's dogs come in and take it away. And he is furious and devastated. And that is a big preserving thing. I mean, preservers don't all focus on the same things, but one of them is food. And if a preserver has a food that they were really looking forward to having, they've been thinking about it all day, maybe all week, and then for whatever reason, that is taken away from them, that is one of the big catastrophes that can happen in their life. Another thing is he bargains for the Christmas tree. So, and then the narrator, he's described as being like an Arab trader, only twice as shrewd. So he loves getting a deal. Another big preserving thing and another big preserving eight thing. But setting all of that aside, and a bit of trivia I read, don't know if it's true, was that it's possible Jack Nicholson was going to play this role. As brilliant of an actor as he is, I just can't imagine anyone anywhere ever doing better than Darren McGavin did in that role.
No.
Just a note-perfect comic performance.
And completely in alignment with the character. I agree with you. I saw that about Jack Nicholson as well, and just can't imagine how different a movie this would have been had Jack Nicholson been in the movie. So I agree. And good call on the preserving eight thing. I wasn't quite so sure, right? I mean, you make a really good and compelling case, and I agree with it. I was playing around with, there was some 3-ish elements to him, right? The competition, winning the bigger, the very prestigious award, sort of thing, when it was really just a contest, and setting kind of a goal for himself or speed to change the tire, but those things are consistent with the 8 as well, right? I mean, I know I'm exceptionally competitive and, I'm an 8. And so I think that's a great call. I also think I want to touch on the instinctual bias theme that I don't know that we so much talked about it, but there's a whole lot of preserving in this movie, right? And I think for me, what we see in both of these movies we've talked about so far is this sense of nostalgia. Nostalgia is a preserving thing. Now, of course, everybody has a feeling for nostalgia, but when I think about these things, I think about curling up on the sofa in front of a fire with a blanket and, some snacks, popcorn, whatever it is, very much a preserving experience. And I think that holidays like Christmas really tap into that. You made reference to the Hallmark Channel, which is in the midst of its 6 months of Christmas movies, that it does every year. And that's preserving world, right? It is all about these happy, comfortable, formulaic, I know what's going to happen next, sort of stories, very structured, very process-oriented things that we see in the preserving domain. So this fear of shooting your eye out, okay, again, very much it, fear of the bully, so forth. So huge preserving theme through this movie, as well as It's a Wonderful Life. Again, kind of a 7-ish undercurrent. I don't know that I could say any of the characters were a compelling 7, right? Ralphie, I don't know, maybe. Although I think the kid actor was great. Peter Billingsley was perfect for this. But it's this idea of excitement, right? But again, that's just being a kid too, right? And this again, where we get to, okay, well, is it just being a kid or is it being a 7? And, that we so often run into when we're thinking about Enneagram types. TJ Ingrassia, Enneagram related thoughts with A Christmas Story.
Okay, well, I guess we'll go on to Ralphie, the main character, and I'm a little torn on this one, so I'll throw out a couple options here, and you guys can tear it apart. I guess I should say I'm always a little bit nervous typing children, but it's a fictional portrayal, so we'll just kind of take it on its own terms. I was a little stuck. I was going back and forth between Ralphie as a preserving 3 or a transmitting 9. Mm-hmm. And I feel like those two, similar to maybe a transmitting 5 or the preserving 7, are almost like the mirror images of each other. Mm-hmm. Preserving 3 and transmitting 9 seem to have some similar characteristics. Mm-hmm. Ralphie was he's constantly daydreaming. That's a theme throughout the film. That feels sort of 9-ish, when the going gets tough, retreat to the inner sanctum and daydream about it. There's a bit of a passive aggressiveness to him. He's not going to come right out. An 8 kid's going to say, "Hey, Mom, give me a BB gun for Christmas." But he's trying to be sneaky about it. He puts the magazine in his mother's magazine. He's going to write the essay for the teacher. But he's also very focused on, clearly he wants to succeed in getting this BB gun. He has a singular focus and drive to get it. In the scene with Santa Claus, he freezes up. Santa says, "How about a nice football?" He's like, "Football? What's a football?" He starts to go down the slide. He realizes his mistake. He traps himself on the slide and claws his way back up to tell Santa what he really wants. And then, of course, Santa tells him he'll shoot his eye out and pushes him back down the slide. But I was torn on which direction. I don't know. Do you guys see either of those in there? Do you agree, disagree?
Well, I'll go here. So I think the transmitting nine's a good call, right? I hadn't thought too much about it, but as you're talking about him, he reminds me so much of my third son, who is a transmitting nine, who is just easygoing, likable, but a wolf in sheep's clothing, and in a lot of ways, right? So when just like Ralphie, when my son wants something, you can see the wheels starting to turn, right? He doesn't want to come out and say, "Hey, how about this?" He starts easing into it. You can see him, say, "Hey, yeah, I'm not saying that. I was just thinking, I saw these new sneakers online. They're pretty cool. I'm not saying I want them, but they're pretty cool, And then he comes back and he says, "Yeah, those sneakers, they're going to be on sale." So, and so, and very much Ralphie. Okay, but also this sort of sweet, innocent, daydreamy, sort of airy quality. As you said, TJ, the transmitting nine is an Enneagram type that is very misidentified, often identified as a 3 or maybe a 7 or something like that. That's an interesting call to me, so I like it. TJ Dawe, any thoughts on that?
One thing that supports the possibility of him being a 9 is the scene when he turns and confronts the bully that's been tormenting him through the movie. Mm-hmm. Also, the narration overall is, I think, very 9-ish, of looking back fondly on one's childhood, including presenting bullying, like usually the camera's sped up, or so the characters are skittering across the screen and fun music is playing. It's almost like a scene from a silent film. So it's like saying, "Oh, we all got bullied as a kid. It was kind of harmless. Wasn't that fun?" As opposed to the fact that it's a genuinely traumatic experience for a lot of people.
Yes.
So there's a 9-ishness there. And then there's a scene where he finally turns and confronts the bully and then ends up beating the absolute shit out of him, drawing blood from his face. Yeah. And the bully doesn't get one punch in, and Ralph just sits on his chest, giving him blow to the face after blow to the face, which seemed antithetical to 9, unless you consider the pattern of 9's repressing anger. And sometimes that placid
until it blows,
erupts.
Yes.
And then, whoa, be careful. And then how does he react after the fact? He's horrified at what he's done, and he's certain that punishment is going to come, which doesn't. But he's not proud of the fact that he's powerful. He's not happy that he vanquished the bully. He really hates that side of him came out.
Yes.
One other thing that's thrown in there is his daydreaming is, I could definitely see the 9-ishness of it, but particularly being a 4, I can see a lot of 4 in there. Mm. So, because his daydreams are always self-aggrandizing. I'm protecting my cowering family from bandits with my new rifle. My teacher, who's presented almost like this Victorian woman, is melodramatically tormented by all of these horrific papers that all the other students have written. But when she sees Ralphie's and when she reads it, the theme from Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet swells, and she falls in love with the glory of his prose, and he's lifted up on the shoulders of his classmates, very much like the opening scene of Rushmore, which is a self-aggrandizing fantasy.
Right.
But the most foolish fantasy of all is when he fantasizes about returning to his family after he's been struck blind because they washed out his mouth with soap so many times. And they cry and they admit their error and they beg for his forgiveness as he smiles at the camera. And every 4 has had that fantasy that my family will one day realize just how cruel they've been to me, and they will beg my forgiveness, and it will be too late.
Yeah, great observations. And I think they're all really valid. The mother, again, I think probably another character who is, maybe a preserving 2, maybe a 6. There was a lot of 6 stuff going on with the mother, I felt. Let's see. No other characters jump out at me as, being clearly defined Enneagram types. Go ahead, TJ.
One last thing about the dad being preserving 8 is it's the dad that gives him the rifle at the end. And the scene is actually really beautiful when he gives it to him.
I almost cry every time. It's really a beautiful scene.
He's incredibly tender. He's gentle. The mother didn't know that the dad bought him the rifle, and dad just kind of justifies it, saying, I got a rifle like that when I was a kid. And he really does care for his son. And very much like an 8, it's like, I want my son to have this kind of manly gift to be able to protect himself, to be tough.
Yeah, great observation. Okay, so A Christmas Story. I as I watched it again, it's one of those movies you've seen a bunch of times. I was a little too old to appreciate this as a kid. I was, already an adult when that movie came out. But really a good movie. I really enjoyed watching it. It's the first time I've sat down and watched it all the way through in quite a few years. So again, I recommend A Christmas Story. And I'll also say I read somewhere that it took them forever to find the actor to play Ralphie, and they hit a home run with this one because I think Peter Billingsley was just perfect look, for the character. Did a great job, really compelling. So really, really good acting job, I felt.
And let me say one more thing while we're talking about nostalgia, this might make you guys feel depressed, makes me feel depressed. The movie's made in 1983, set in 1940. There's almost as much time has passed now between today and when the movie was made as between the nostalgia they were depicting when they made it in the 80s. So
thank you for that.
If they made that movie today, it would be set in, the early 80s.
Yeah. And I was in college when that movie came out. So.
And the Ralphie today would want a Star Wars pistol or something like that.
Right. And I'll also just say that we didn't mention this, but it was a hit. Yeah, I mean, a modest hit, but it was a profitable movie when it came out. I mean, it wasn't a big hit, but it was a very inexpensive movie to make, and made I think it made about $20 million on a $3 million budget. So, but certainly with all the replays that it's got, whoever has the rights to that movie has made a bit of money over the years. All right. So movie number 3 is Elf. Elf is my Christmas movie, right? Whenever I think of Christmas time, I think I want to watch Elf. It's not A Christmas Story. It's not A Wonderful Life. It's because as a kid, I always enjoyed Elf so much. No, only kidding. Elf was made in 2003. I actually saw it in the movie theater. I remember in Mount Pocono, Pennsylvania, up in this tiny little movie theater in the Pocono Mountains, and enjoyed it then and have laughed my butt off every time I've seen the movie since then. I just think this is one of the most entertaining, charming, sweet, funny movies that you'll come across, right? This is obviously, I think it's the most, A Christmas Story is about Christmas for sure, and Elf is certainly a Christmas movie as well. Okay, it is really about that. So it is a 2003 American Christmas comedy, film directed by Jon Favreau. Boy, I'll tell you, when I saw Swingers way back in the day, I never thought Jon Favreau would be Jon Favreau. But man, oh man, has that guy gone on and done some things since then. Starring Will Ferrell, I'm sorry, with hands down his best role. He was born to play this character. Chris Farley and Jim Carrey were also considered for this role, but who probably would have been fine. I'm not a Jim Carrey fan. Chris Farley would have been an interesting choice, but man, Will Ferrell was amazing in this movie. James Caan, our friend from The Godfather and from Heat, which we talk about in a later episode. Thief. Thank you. Yes. Zoe Deschanel, Mary Steenburgen, and in addition to Ed Asner, who is a gruff but lovable Santa Claus, one of my all-time favorites, Bob Newhart. Okay, you guys, again, probably don't remember the Bob Newhart show from back in its time.
I saw Nick at Night.
Well, for me, TJ, it was just Night.
Right.
When the Bob, when both of the Bob Newhart shows were on, but always some of my favorites. He was great as Papa Elf. So, plot is on Christmas Eve, Santa Claus is off doing his thing, visiting an orphanage, and a little orphan boy crawls into his sack and is taken back to the North Pole. Once he is discovered there at the workshop, the elves name him Buddy after the diaper's brand label, and Papa Elf, played again by Bob Newhart, adopts him. Buddy is accepted by the elf community and grows up thinking he is an elf, but soon learns that he's really human. Fact that becomes abundantly clear when he is twice the size of everybody else when he grows up. Papa Elf explains that Buddy was born to Walter Hobbs and Susan Wells, and that Susan put him up for adoption prior to her death. Walter now works as a children's book publisher at the Empire State Building in New York City. Now, I have to editorial comment here, say James Caan as a children's book editor is a little bit of a stretch, right? But I think he's good in this movie. He's unaware of Buddy's existence. Santa reveals that Walter is on the naughty list due to his selfishness, but suggests Buddy could help him redeem Walter. So Buddy heads off to New York from the North Pole, having sort of the Rankin Bass Christmas shows like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman and all that sort of stuff. So it was very much that sort of stop-action experience on his trip, right? So he heads to New York. He's first confused as somebody there to deliver a Christmas gram. So there's a bit of an awkward scene where, he's expected to sing a song to James Caan and he has to make one up on the go, which is quite funny. Now, he gets ejected from the Empire State Building, the building where his father works, and somebody says to him, go back down to Gimbel's, where you belong. Now, Gimbel's is clearly a stand-in for Macy's here, and Gimbel's was a department store, but long closed by this time. And he there is mistaken for part of the staff because, in case I didn't mention this, he is dressed like a 6'3" elf. And so he takes it upon himself to completely redecorate the Christmas section of Gimbel's. He becomes smitten with the Zoe Deschanel character, whose name is Jovi. Kind of a mismatch in partnering. I'm not quite sure what she saw in him, but it was part of the script, so we'll go along with it. Now, he goes back to see Walter. I think he calls him because he ends up getting arrested after confronting the not real Santa Claus, played by Artie Lang, who used to be on the Howard Stern show, because you smell like
beef and cheese.
Beef and cheese.
You sit on a throne of lies.
So he ends up in jail and calls Walter to bail him out, which he does. Walter gets a paternity test, finds out that, yes, indeed, Buddy is his son at the suggestion of the doctor, played by Jon Favreau. He takes him home to meet his wife and son, and Buddy is reluctantly taken into the fold, where we start to learn of all of Buddy's lovable quirks, such as a love of sugar and maple syrup, and a great ability to burp. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but in the credits, there's actually credit given to the person who did Buddy's burp during that scene.
And a magnificent performance it was.
It certainly was, So that guy, whoever he is, has a career ahead of him in the burp voiceovers. So let's see what else happens here, because for me, the first 2/3 or so of Elf are perfect. The ending gets a little silly when the whole Santa Claus and the sleigh thing happen, but that is what happens. So something I forgot to mention is that the books, the children's publishing business is struggling, right? And so Walter has to come up with a solution. So they decide to hire Miles Fincher, played by Peter Dinklage, in a wonderful little cameo. Peter Dinklage, who plays the dwarf brother in Game of Thrones, and who Buddy mistakes for an elf. Now, I would say that the Peter Dinklage character is probably an 8, right? Based on his mixed martial arts reaction to Buddy in this sort of situation. Okay, so let's see. The published company is failing. Again, Buddy creates a bit of a mess. He decides to leave. He leaves his apology note on an Etch-a-Sketch, and he leaves. They go off looking for him, also encounter Santa Claus, who is at this time having technical problems with the sleigh, apparently in Central Park. And they use helping people recapture the spirit of Christmas to reignite the sleigh, save Christmas, redeem Walter, and all go to live happily ever after. At the end of the movie, Buddy writes a children's book based on his experience that also saves the company, and life goes on happily ever after. Who wants to share Enneagram-related thoughts on Elf?
I'll start. I thought it was interesting at the very beginning. We were talking about our Christmas experiences, and TJ Dawe, you were talking about sort of Christmas having a 2-ish feel, and Mario, you were talking about Christmas as a 7. And I feel like Elf is a good example of a film and a character that it's portraying a character that basically would never exist in real life, because I feel like Buddy is a perfect combination of a 2 and a 7. He's striving to feel excited while striving to feel like he wants to feel connected in an exciting way, and he wants to feel excited in a connecting way. It's the two. There's almost no situation where he's doing one without the other. So that it was interesting you guys brought those two up, because Elf is the perfect Christmas movie and maybe embodying the two perfect, the spirit of the two Christmas types. So yeah, I'll throw that out there. What do you think?
All right, good. TJ Dawe.
Yeah, one of the 7 things that really jumped out to me, and probably my favorite comedic element of the whole movie, is the sense of possibility. There's just a comedically blatant disregard for the laws of physics and the way things actually work. So when Buddy travels from the North Pole to New York, it just shows from a distance him merrily tromping through a high mountain range, dressed in tights, no supplies with him, no indication of where he sleeps or what he eats. When he shows up, he's, his clothes aren't bedraggled at all. He's not tired. He's not hungry. When he decorates the department store overnight, he's just tireless. When he helps the kid win a snowball fight, they've sped up the camera, so he's whipping snowballs, the speed of a machine gun, and they really set it up like an action film. So they do all of these things, and that is a very 7-ish thing, because in the 7 mentality, anything is possible, even the impossible. We'll find a way. We'll attack it with enough enthusiasm that we'll make it work. So I thought that was a consistent motif throughout the movie, and one that I very much enjoyed.
So for me, so this is interesting, and I hear what you're saying, TJ Ingrassia, about the 7 and the 2 here, because there is this theme of connection. Look, striving to feel excited is how we describe the, and if there is anybody striving to feel excited, ever portrayed on film, it is Buddy the Elf, right? I mean, he is just this ball of wonder and amazement, and again, played by Will Ferrell in just an amazing, amazing portrayal. I mean, I could sit here and watch him eat cotton balls all day long, right? I mean, just, just the glee and the amazement to which he brought. Now, I would see him as a transmitting 7. Okay, other people would call this the sexual subtype. And now, there's nothing sexual about Buddy, right? There is this romance. But what I see in transmitting 7s is they're the kind of this super type of sort of the stereocharged 7. Right, high energy, very highly verbal. It's kind of the Robin Williams or Jim Carrey stereotype of the 7, of excessively verbal and so forth. But to your point, TJ, we're talking about somebody who thinks they're an elf here, right? We're talking about a fictional character, and it's going to be played to effect, so it's not a real life portrayal. Mm-hmm. But I certainly see that. For me, Elf just captures. Again, I'll go back to the 7 thing. All the things I really love about 7s, and I see this as somebody who's married to one and who has 2 sons who are 7s, of this innocence, this good intention, right? Of just this wanting others to be happy. 7s get a bad rap in a lot of the Enneagram literature as being narcissistic and selfish and only thinking about themselves. That's simply not my experience with 7s. Yes, of course, everybody's self-absorbed at times, but in my experience, 7s want other people to be happy. Now, sometimes that's self-serving, right? I'll be happy if you're happy, right? You're bringing me down, so I want you to be happy. But other times I think, the thing I notice about 7s is just this lack of ill intent that is there. So for me, there was 7 all over this character. I think James Caan, who will never be anything but an 8 in my eyes. I mean, just I think I can't think of a movie portrayal he's ever been in, from Sonny Corleone to Frank in The Thief, just on and on down the line. James Caan is an 8. The Mary Steenburgen character, perhaps a 9, but kind of 2-ish as well, right? We see a lot of that sort of thing. And Ed Asner, another one. I don't know that Ed Asner could ever play anything other than an 8 either in my book. So again, kind of a gruff sort of Santa Claus. Bob Newhart, a 9, right? Bob Newhart has that slow, self-deprecating 9-ish sort of quality that he brings to all his roles. So I thought that was a good one. Zooey Deschanel. TJ Dawe, I'm curious, would you place an Enneagram type on her?
Yeah, 4.
What would that be, TJ?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So when we first meet her, she's immediately cynical about Buddy's enthusiasm. She says, please stop talking to me. I'm just trying to get through the holidays. So she works at this department store in elf garb, but it's just a job. She doesn't care about it. She has no warm feelings about Christmas. When he tells her about singing, she says, thanks, but I don't sing. I can sing. I just choose not to sing, especially in front of other people. And her arc as a character is singing Christmas carols in public to inspire other people to remember the meaning of Christmas, which for a 4, that is a big goal to imagine doing that. To sing Santa Claus is Coming to Town, one of the most trite and happy and major key Christmas carols of all, in public, and to do it with enthusiasm and to do it in a way that opens the door for other people to join her. It's like, yep, that is a huge journey for a 4. What does she see in Buddy? I think what she sees in him is that she is a female character in a comedy movie. And that pattern happens a lot, especially in that era. A lot of Adam Sandler movies have that motif as well. The male is kind of a man-child. Seth Rogen movies had this a lot too. And the woman is beautiful and intelligent and has a lot going for her and just mysteriously is attracted to the man-child. And he is not required to mature in the slightest. It's telling a lot of the 18 to 24-year-old male audience that these movies are targeted at exactly what they want to hear. Yes.
You can sit around, smoke dope, and Katherine Heigl will still fall in love with you, right? So, yeah, I get it. Yeah, a great call. Yeah, so it seems kind of foolish to me, the character. What was interesting is in the original script, she was not supposed to sing. She was not. It was not called for her to sing. But then Jon Favreau found out that she is a singer because she was in a band as well, duet. I forget exactly what it was. Yeah, so he said, "Okay, well, let's have her sing," and I thought she did a great job of that. Other thoughts on Elf?
Okay, one thing to say about Bob Newhart. Absolutely agree that he's a 9. Funny coincidence. A friend of mine and collaborator had one line in this movie, which was partially filmed in Vancouver, and was also Bob Newhart's stand-in. And that friend is himself a 9. And he was on set when Newhart was doing all his lines. They used a lot of forced perspective to make him seem really short. So there was a lot of work for his stand-in. And he said when they were filming, he would do the lines, his characteristic stammer would come at a different point with every take. And every time it was funny. And just to reference Bob Newhart's TV career, his second sitcom in the 80s, Newhart, not the Bob Newhart Show. Newhart was the one that I knew and loved, where he was running an inn in Vermont. I read a book on sitcom writing once, and it described the 2 types of protagonists in a sitcom. There's the active and the reactive type. So the active protagonist in a sitcom is making a bad decision and going out and causing a problem, and then that problem needs to be cleaned up. So, Lucy in I Love Lucy, or Ralph Cramden, or Michael Scott are classic examples of that. And then the reactive is the one who isn't making bad decisions. They're kind of the calm center as all the craziness is happening around them, and their role is to try and solve or contain the craziness. And Bob Newhart's the epitome of that. And it is a very 9-ish role. And something some of his co-stars said about working with him is he always saw them as ensembles. It was never a vehicle for him, even though his name was literally in the title. And he's the one that had the big career before the show started. But he was perfectly happy to cede one brilliant comedic moment after another to his co-stars and to supporting actors. And that is the generosity that's very characteristic of a 9 as well.
And I will say that anyone who has not seen, I can never remember. The Bob Newhart show was the first one, right? And then Newhart was the second one about the in Vermont. Both great, but the second series was just a genius ensemble. I still every so often say, "Hi, I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl. This is my other brother Daryl." Just one of those signs that one of those lines that stands out, for eternity. The Peter Scolari character was fantastic. Just up and down the line, and nobody did better reaction shots than Bob Newhart. Okay, so I completely agree. TJ Ingrassia, go ahead. You were going to say something about
Yes.
Elf.
Okay. So I wanted to go back to Walter Hobbs for a minute. So I'd like you to elaborate on that, Mario, a little bit. I saw Walter Hobbs as more of a 3. I got more of a 3-ish vibe from him. If for no other reason, I feel like if you boil Walter Hobbs down to his essence, is he striving for power or is he striving for success? I feel like he's more striving for success than power. So explain to me what you're seeing in there.
Fair enough. What I'm seeing is James Caan, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm seeing James Caan trying to play a 3, perhaps, right? And and just still being his essential James Caan-ness underneath it. So that's a completely valid argument. And I think if you look at the character and the issues and so forth, then yeah, 3 is an argument I could buy.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense, though.
Yeah, but I can't buy that guy as a 3, right? So
yeah, when his boss, Mr. Greenway, comes in and chews him out for the pages, you'd imagine James Caan standing up and right. punching him in the face. He was a little timid in that scene. It seemed for a James Caan.
Exactly right. Now, Peter Dinklage, great 8-ish character in this, very different from the Game of Thrones character. I just thought that little part was just fantastic. One of the funniest scenes in the movie. Let's see. So I guess that's it about Elf. I'll just say that we already mentioned that Peter Billingsley did have a cameo, Ralphie from A Christmas Story.
Well, so let's say he was Ming Ming, who he goes uncredited in the credits, but he does say his name. He's Buddy's elf supervisor in the Santa's workshop in the beginning of the film.
Yes. Let's see. Artie Lang, again, the comedian Artie Lang plays the Santa Claus. The fake Santa Claus who smells of beef and cheese.
Which I imagine Artie Lang does smell of beef and cheese, so it's probably
yeah. So, and hopefully I'll never find that out for in person, much as I like. And nice little at least voiceover cameo from one of my favorite folks, Leon Redbone, who played the snowman named Leon. And the snowman was actually even made to look like Leon Redbone in real life. So run out and see Elf, or at least make time to see it when it shows up on cable within the next couple of weeks. My pick of the podcast for movies to watch. Now, that said, we're going to move on to what I would say is my second favorite of these 4 movies. And again, we can get into whether or not, we will get into whether or not this is a Christmas movie, but we are going to talk about the movie Die Hard. Are you interested in learning more about our approach to the Enneagram? Go to awareness-to-action.com and check out our certification program. We offer a clear, concise, business-friendly, and science-minded approach while maintaining the depth of traditional approaches to the system. At Awareness to Action International, we're the leading innovators in the theory and pragmatic applications of this system to all aspects of the work environment, including leadership and personal development, team building, diversity and culture, and managing change. However, this approach is not just for the business world. A lot of people who attend our trainings do so for their own self-development or spiritual growth. Our certification program is one of only a handful of curricula accredited as a school by the International Enneagram Association. It is currently being conducted virtually and combines live sessions with asynchronous learning. Again, find out more at awareness-to-action.com. TJ Dawe, tell us about Die Hard, please.
Yeah, Die Hard's a very obscure movie. I'm sure most people listening to this are not familiar with it. So let me tell you what happens in it. It's the story of John McClane, played by Bruce Willis, who's a New York cop. He flies to LA to attend the Christmas party at the corporate tower, where his somewhat estranged wife, Holly, works, played by Bonnie Bedelia. This came out in 1988, by the way. Yeah, there's some very 80s sensibilities in here, particularly regarding the relationship of the husband and wife. So it's Christmas Eve. Most of the building is unoccupied. A number of the floors are still under construction. Holly and John argue over her move to LA, which split the family up. Kids are with her. And the kids are at home being taken care of by a Latina housekeeper. And they also argue about her going by her maiden name, Gennaro. So they argue, they go off in different directions. While John is off in another part of the building, the party is taken over by German terrorists led by Hans Gruber, played by Alan Rickman in his first film role. John,
that was his first film role?
His very first
was
role
it really?
in a movie. He was 42.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a theater actor before that, and that's it.
Uh-huh.
So the audience had no idea who he was coming in, and that did set up a career of mostly playing villain. So John is in hiding when everybody else gets taken hostage. He sneaks around. He sees the terrorists execute one of the executives when he doesn't give them the security code. And using guerrilla tactics, given that he's only one man, he fights the terrorists, killing a number of them one at a time. And eventually the police arrive, as well as the FBI, which Hans Gruber had expected. The plan, as it's eventually revealed, isn't any kind of political cause. It's a robbery. $640 million in bearer bonds that the corporation has in their safe. And the terrorists plan to explode the building's upper floors and make it seem like they had all died in an operation gone wrong, ensuring that they would never be pursued. John McClane foils all of this in a variety of action-packed ways, and the movie climaxes with Hans Gruber hanging off the side of the building, holding onto Holly's Rolex, which he was given as a bonus for being such a smart businesswoman. McClane undoes the clasp on the watch. Gruber falls to his death. And the previously at each other's throats couple fall into each other's arms. Holly proudly takes back her married name when she's introduced to a police officer who's been helping John at a distance this whole movie. So as I mentioned, the movie came out in 1988. It was an immediate hit. It spawned a number of sequels, none of them approaching the original's quality or popularity. Made Bruce Willis a major star, particularly of action movies. It spawned a number of imitation movies. And a handful of years ago, it started being celebrated as a Christmas movie, even though, in my opinion, the setting of Christmas is nominal. This movie could easily take place at a different type of year without changing much at all. And it is not a movie about someone discovering the spirit of Christmas, although it does end with the reunion of a family.
Yeah. So agreed. So just to kind of give my wife a hard time, I will always refer to Die Hard as a Christmas movie because I know it bothers her. But come on, I agree with you, TJ, that it just is a movie, much like, say, Lethal Weapon, that just happens to take place at Christmas time, but it's not really part of the script in a particular way. A couple of big things. You're absolutely right. This was huge. This was a hugely influential movie for a number of reasons. It spawned many, many imitators. It spawned, things like Speed, which is basically Die Hard on a bus. It spawned that Wesley Snipes movie, Passenger 57, which is Die Hard on a plane. So movie producers for a while there were looking for what other sort of thing can we put somebody else. So there was the Steven Seagal movie, Under Siege, basically Die Hard on a naval ship, right? Kind of thing. So we see this theme over and over again. Another thing that it really perfected was the everyman hero. Up until that point, most heroes were sort of a John Wayne sort of in charge character. But this is a guy who's one of the reasons it was so successful is because everybody could relate to John McClane, right? Everybody could see themselves in these situations where I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm scared to death, but I'm going to figure out a way to survive here. Again, this made Bruce Willis, but he was already pretty, getting pretty big through the TV show Moonlighting. Was with Sybil Shepherd. He was a pretty big star, went on to be a huge, huge star after this movie. And another thing it did really, really well was the great, great actor playing a villain. Okay. Now, that had been done before. I think of Laurence Olivier in Marathon Man, for example. We could argue that he was a pretty good actor and played a villain. But Alan Rickman was just fantastic in this, right? And, really, really, really set a standard for bad guys. Even if we look at some of the other Die Hard on a blank, characters, I don't think any of them really compared. Even the great Dennis Hopper, in Speed. I mean, he's Dennis Hopper, and he was, great, but not as chilling or scary, I think, as Alan Rickman was in this movie. So tell us about Enneagram types. TJ Ingrassia, I'm going to throw it to you again.
Okay.
So you're doing, look, you're
throwing
doing,
me to the wolves here.
No, not at all. You're doing fantastic. But so I'm hoping I catch you in something I disagree with. So
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
All right. Well, okay. I'll go. There's one I'm confident in and one I'm not confident in. So
Gotcha.
we'll start with John McClane, and I'll give that's the one I'm not confident in, but I'll throw out my guess and we'll go from there. So I saw a lot of 6-ish qualities in John McClane, mostly his, I guess the idea of, what would you call it, threat awareness. There's this constant theme through the movie of him noticing his surroundings, being aware of threats. He walks into a room, he notices the security cameras, he sees what's going on around him. He also has there's this recurring theme of him, he says to himself, think, damn it, think. He's always coming up with new ideas, sort of, he sees the Santa hat and he decides to put it on the bad guy and roll him down the, if it wasn't set at Christmas, you said it could be set at any time. If it wasn't set at Christmas time, he couldn't have written ho, ho, ho on the bad guy's shirt. So if for no other reason, that should solidify it.
Yes. Yeah.
He's sort of testing his environment, the cat and mouse thing with the bad guys. But I'm not convinced. That was sort of what initially struck me, but I'm more than willing to be convinced otherwise.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I like that. You said there was another one you were more confident in, another assessment.
I would say Holly, his wife, is a no questions 3 in my book.
And I would also say, if we're looking at minor characters, the epitome of the sleazy kind of transmitting 3 was her coworker. What was his name?
Starts with an E, I think.
Yeah, was it Elliot or
Ellis?
Harry Ellis, yes,
yeah.
Played by Hart Bachner. Really. So I thought they were kind of I don't want to say 2 versions of 3, but one a really kind of stereotypical, negative portrayal with 3, and her a very positive one, right? I mean, she was ambitious and driven, but in a good way, I felt, right? So,
and at the beginning, in the initial scene when John and Holly are starting to argue in her office, John says to her, Ellis has his eye on you. And she says, that's okay. I've got my eye on his corner bathroom. Private bathroom, yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, that stood out to me as well. TJ Dawe.
Yeah, just a note about that, about Holly being a big old 3. A film professor of mine described how there's a motif in this movie of backlash against feminism, against women entering the workplace. This adventure would not have happened if she hadn't been such an ambitious and successful career woman. It's a point. It's presented as a betrayal that she's using her maiden name, and he pointedly says that she's going by Ms. Gennaro, like that's a dig at him. And then, of course, at the end, she proudly takes back the name McClane, and they're reunited. Although there is no implication that she's going to give up her job. There's no sense of what the future is for that company, but there is the implication that we're married again, and she's remembered that she's John McClane's wife, and that's a good thing.
That's really a good observation. And let's see, this movie was made release date July 1988. So if you think back to that time, we had come through the late 60s and the 70s, which was the era of feminism. And we were at the tail end of the Reagan remuscularization of American society, I'll call it, right? Rambo, Chuck Norris, all those sort of movies that were coming back. And now we're going to go out and put women back in their place and go kill some commies while we're at it. So, very good call. Very interesting.
And then maybe not coincidental then, and I hadn't put these two together, but director John McTiernan also directed Predator, The Hunt for Red October, Last Action Hero. So there's not a lot of, positive female characters in those films, as far as I'm aware.
Right. Good. TJ Dawe, what else about Die Hard?
Hans Gruber, not a particularly fleshed out character, but possibly a 3, I was thinking. He's slick, he's well dressed, he's well groomed. We even find out, the name of the tailor that he got his suits from. He has this elaborate plan which hinges on deception. He knows his stuff, he's done his homework, he's very cold. The only principle he cares about is his own success, although he doesn't mind the benefit of notoriety. which is something that can happen with threes as they go down the levels. I want to be known, even if it's for the wrong reasons. And he references Alexander the Great. He wept as there were no more worlds to conquer. And I need to study him more to say this with confidence. Wouldn't be surprised if Alexander the Great was a big old three. And then he really reacts when Holly refers to him as a common thief. He gets his back up and says, I'm an exceptional thief. And he's very good at doing the American accent to deceive John McClane.
Yeah, good. Interesting. I saw him as more of a one-ish sort of character, with that precision and that, I think it's easy to overlook a one as a bad guy, right? Or as a bank robber or something, because we all think that they're going to be Gandhi or something. But I think the argument could be made either way, TJ. My initial reaction was this sort of stiff, calculating, proper kind of one-ish, right? Probably the transmitting version, if I had to put a subtype on it. But I agree with you, not particularly fleshed out. TJ Ingrassia, I don't know, do you have a thought on?
Yeah, I was between those two. I'd probably lean more towards the one. There's the scene when him and Takagi are talking about the model of the Indonesian bridge, and Han says that as a boy he loved making models because of the exactness, the attention to every detail. Honestly, I was going back and forth between 1 and 5. There's a bit of a detachment to him, that attention to detail, the planning, everything is set out. But I agree with what you said that his character is not that fleshed out. It's right. I think you could make a case for any of these. And if I was going to use clips from this film in my typecast series, I could probably use in any of those videos, pull the clips and it would make sense.
Right. A couple of the other characters worth mentioning, Reginald Vell Johnson as Sergeant Powell, really good. It felt kind of nine-ish to me, in a lot of ways. So Paul Gleason, who plays one of the FBI Special Agent Johnsons, which I just thought was a wonderful touch, right? I mean, just for somebody who hasn't seen the movie in a while, these two FBI agents show up, one black, one white, and they're both named Agent Johnson. Okay. And there's a great scene where one of them's on the phone or the radio or something, and he says, yeah, this is Johnson. He goes, no, not that one. It's just such a random throwaway sort of line that was just so funny for me. But Paul Gleason, from listeners who listened to the Breakfast Club episode, played the principal in the Breakfast Club and was also in one of my other favorite movies, which is another, I'm feeling next year's lineup already filling up, Trading Places. He plays Mr. Beeks in Trading Places. So I always enjoy seeing Paul Gleason show up in almost anything.
I think he played Robinson, who is the police supervisor. I'm thinking the same guy. And
yeah, if you're talking about the principal.
You're right.
And his role was to disdain what Powell had said. To disdain, It's a beautiful cliche of genre movies, which is the police officer who doesn't believe that what we know the audience know to be true is true, and thus perpetuates the problem.
Thank you for correcting me there, because I was conflating two character actors there, right? And the other one who played the white Agent Johnson, I'm now drawing a blank on his name, but he played the bad guy.
Dawe.
Robert Dawe, that's right. So it's funny because I had a client many, many years ago who looked exactly like Robert Dawe. And people always used to say, hey, you're that guy in the movies, right? And so I used to, every time I'd see him, I'd say, hey, it's noted character actor Robert Dawe. So I'm really embarrassed that I drew a blank on Robert Dawe's name. But yes, it was great to see him. Yes, I was talking about Paul Gleason and how much I enjoy him, but I was conflating the characters. So thank you for that clarification. Let's see. As far as McClane is concerned, interesting, TJ, about the sixth theme. Bruce Willis I have always struggled with because, again, I remember Moonlighting when it was on TV back in the 80s, and that character was a whole lot of seven. Right, going on, okay? And in Bruce Willis, there's a whole lot of seven stuff, but he sort of took a turn career-wise, probably around the time of Pulp Fiction, where that character's a whole lot of 8 going on, right? So, and in many of his roles since then, it's kind of an 8-ish character. And I think we've seen this progression of John McClane over the 4 movies, going from somebody who's more 6-ish, 7-ish to more of somebody who's more 8-ish. Okay. Bruce Willis in real life is an interesting character too, because every time I read other actors talking about him, they talk about how intimidating and scary he is, which again would make me lean toward 8. But early Bruce Willis seemed pretty darn 7-ish, or at least somebody who was exploring that side of him. So for me, it's a mystery. I don't know. Thoughts from you guys on Bruce Willis or the character?
I could buy the possible interpretation of him as a 7. Again, more so than Hans Gruber, but it's not a really fleshed out portrait.
Yeah.
Aristotle would like this movie because it has unity of plot and of time and almost of place. Almost the entire movie takes place in this one building. So
Yes.
the span of time it's almost real time. So
Yes.
we don't get to know this guy that much. One of the noted things about him, which was supposedly written in and somewhat improvised, is a lot of wisecracks. A lot of teasing and taunting the terrorists with jokes, or sometimes just cracking jokes to himself, which 7s don't have a monopoly on that. But there is a very 7-ish element to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Bruce Willis isn't an actor who I'm at least familiar with in terms of, it's not like, he's always being interviewed or he's always making public appearances. Virtually the only thing I know about him is his performances in movies and TV shows. So that makes it that much harder to know what the man is actually like in the flesh.
Right. Yeah, he's one of those guys that, back in the 80s into the early 90s was all over the media. I mean, I don't know how well you guys remember him from back in that time, but he was all over the news. He even had that singing career as Bruno, kind of an alter ego, would go out and play harmonica and, lead a band and all that sort of stuff. So he's clearly somebody who lived big and boldly in the 80s, and then sort of, I think after marrying Demi Moore and divorcing Demi Moore, kind of became a little bit tabloid shy. So Die Hard, again, not clearly defined, some interesting themes in there. The wisecracking thing, again, a very 80s-ish, early 90s sort of motif in movies. I think of Arnold Schwarzenegger's, one-liners and, so many other characters. Anything else about Die Hard from an Enneagram perspective?
One more thing to mention, and this just struck me as a 7-ish thing, is a phrase that came to me as I was watching it, is that the movie is a buffet of awesome. There's just so many things in there that are there to knock your socks off. It's very black and white. The good guys versus bad guys, there's no shades of gray. The villains are remorseless psychopaths. They kill people.
Yes.
They're not troubled by it in the slightest. Ellis, who we talked about, is such a good, coked up, sleazy 80s guy. He calls Hans Bubby at one point. The thieves fire a bazooka at an armored vehicle and hit it twice. Or the C4 explosive attached to a chair thrown down the elevator shaft and the fireball going right back up and McClane having to leap out of the blast zone. The multiple climaxes, there's McClane fighting Carl. There's jumping off the roof as it explodes. There's the metal ring holding the hose to his waist, falling off the building and almost pulling him out in the middle of the floor that he's managed to smash his way into. There's confronting Hans. There's the twist of the gun taped to his back. There's the watch. There's Carl coming back at the last minute. And there's even Argyle, the limo driver, punching the hacker guy in the face. And then there's Holly punching the sleazy reporter in the face. There's the Barabons falling from the sky. It's like, whoa. It's just this banquet of entertainment kind of overwhelming you of let's make you happy, audience. Let's give you everything you could want in a summer movie and more.
Yeah, excellent point, TJ. I mean, it is a movie that I think lives still up to its reputation for just a wonderful action, I'll say action comedy almost, right? Or at least a humorous action movie. Excellent performances, even if the characters are not, complex. Okay, but still, really good acting that holds it together. Even the Hart Bachner, Ellis character. I mean, you don't like this guy, and it is a stereotype, but he does it so darn well, right? And and that actor has done that character in so many movies. The reporter, who we didn't talk about, the reporter played by I put my notes somewhere else.
William Atherton.
Yes. Again, was in so many movies at that time, as was the female reporter, later shows up in Lethal Weapon and, the Lethal Weapon movies. He's great in it, plays somebody you love to hate. Felt kind of a 6-ish character to me, kind of 3-ish, 6-ish, somewhere in that range, not to, disparage those types, but, so really, really entertaining and enjoyable thrill ride of a movie. TJ Ingrassia, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, nothing Enneagram related. The one thing that I did note at the beginning, there's the scene where Argyle is driving John to the tower in the limo. Argyle puts on some music, and it's a Christmas rap song. John kind of rolls his eyes and says, "Don't you have any Christmas music?" And Argyle says, "This is Christmas music." And then we see the montage, the car goes the thing, the music plays up. So I thought that was a prescient bit of foreshadowing of the, is Die Hard a Christmas movie or not? Some people think it is, some people think it isn't.
Yeah. Is this a Christmas movie? Is this Christmas music?
It's baked right in. And one thing I did notice actually, though, is that throughout, I don't know who did the score for the film, but I guess I was just noticing it because I had this idea of, is it a Christmas movie or not? A lot of the score was sort of riffs and motifs on Christmas songs, taking a Christmas song and toning it down and making it dark for scenes with the terrorists. And yes. I noticed that sprinkled throughout. So certainly, yes. Even if it's not, Christmas based, they certainly in the production were playing up that Christmas aspect of it.
Yes, I think it's Handel's Messiah that plays when they open the safe, right?
Yes.
I think.
Ode to Joy.
Ode to Joy. Yeah, thank you. Ode to Joy, which was Beethoven. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, it was Beethoven before it was ever used in a Christmas song, and that's a motif throughout. And then it plays in full in the credits after Let It Snow. Ode to Joy, that's kind of 7-ish. Not that I think Beethoven was a 7, probably more an 8, but still.
And again, gets back to our, theme of, even if there's not a hugely, clearly defined 7-ish character in this movie. I mean, even your description of it, TJ, as this banquet of awesome or whatever wonderful phrase you used there, 7-ish, right? I mean, just let me have fun and entertainment. Don't make me think too hard. Don't make me think, he would never survive this, or, he'd be dead there, or, there's no way this could happen or that could happen. Just shut up and have fun, right? Is what you want to do when you're watching Die Hard. So that's how an 8 tries to be a 7. All right, great.
One more 7 thing that jumped out at me, just finding out some of the behind the scenes stuff, is when they started filming, they had about 35 pages of script. They were flying by the seat of their pants making this big budget movie, and they only got a complete script when the movie was half done. And as I mentioned before, there was a fair bit of improvising on the set, particularly from Bruce Willis, finding jokes that his character would say, finding lines that his character would say. So there's that kind of 7-ish thing. 7s are great improvisers. They're good at shucking and jiving and making something out of nothing. And sometimes they can pull it off. And then this was based on a novel. The movie, of course, is far more popular than the novel. It was based on a number of things was changed, one of which is that the thieves were changed to thieves. In the novel, they really are terrorists. And John McTiernan decided, no, let's make them thieves, because then we don't have to get into political stuff, which is going to distract you from having fun. It's going to have this dark undertone, this seriousness, and it's going to be really mean. He used that word in an interview. He says so many action movies are just mean, because he wanted to keep the audience entertained. And then he had this really interesting take on it. He said he modeled the script on, of all things, A Midsummer Night's Dream. He said, this is something that happens on a festival night that turns the world upside down. And all the princes become asses, and all the asses become princes. And in the morning, the true lovers are reunited, and everyone goes on, but the world is better than it was the night before.
Boy, I'll tell you, there's a whole lot that goes on behind the scenes of these movies that we really don't understand. So, but that's what makes them so much fun and so interesting. So this just draws to a close. The turkey is not only cooked but eaten, and it's time again to switch into those elastic pants and saddle up for Christmas time. So, guys, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun, and already thinking about Christmas movies for next year that we'll talk about. Trading Places has to go on the list, and for producer Seth, we'll do a White Christmas as well. We'll make sure we'll get that one on the list. That was a request that we couldn't quite get to. So, TJ Ingrassia, again, thank you for being with us. Tell our listener again where they can find out more about you.
Sure. So if you search Typecast Enneagram on YouTube, you can find my Typecast channel. My podcast is called Agnostish. Just Google search for that. You'll find it. I have another series on YouTube called Object Lesson. You can search for that. So, yeah, there you go.
TJ, we're looking forward to having you back. And so when people are going to be listening to this, it's early in season 2, although we are filming this late in our recording cycle. So even though you won't hear TJ again this season, I'm pretty sure you're going to be hearing from him again in the future. Both TJ. So I want to thank TJ Dawe, as always, for this compelling conversation. And TJ, where can people find out more about you, TJ Dawe?
I've got stuff at www.tjdawe.ca. It's a Canadian web domain. So .com will take you somewhere else. .ca is all my stuff.
Great. That's where they can find out about TJ Dawe. All right. So this draws us to a close. Thank you again to producer Seth Creekmore for his work on these, and we'll see you at the movies. The Enneagram in a Movie podcast, which is produced and edited by Seth Creekmore and is part of the Awareness to Action podcast network. Don't forget to go online and support the podcast by taking a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. See you next time.